Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Valero.
And we are the FAIRtax
Guys
again. And we spent the entire program last episode telling you how you can hold your Congress critters' feet to the fire, because we are dedicated to making the fair tax the law of the land. No doubt about it.
Yep. We're going to have to repeat that episode every so often because it is important to keep in close contact with your congressmen and your senators and make sure they never forget that you expect them to co-sponsor the fair tax.
Not just co-sponsor it, but actually actively get out there and promote it.
Yeah.
Because we have got some co-sponsors, and I can name a certain senator from Texas who is a co-sponsor who's not talking about it.
No.
We'll give that senator a break here for right now, because I think he's generally a pretty good guy. But a lot of times, even just being a co-sponsor is not enough. They've got to get out there and make the fair tax part of the national discussion. And the only way that's going to happen is if you push their buttons and make it happen.
And I'll give you a good example of how this happens. My wife and I were so pleased a while back. We went to a town hall not too far from our house where our congressman, Ted Yoho, came and was doing a town hall, taking questions and so forth. And, of course, when he sees my wife and I in our fair tax shirts, he knows he's going to get a question on fair tax.
Yeah. If he calls on you, he knows what you're going to ask him about.
Yeah, exactly. And he is a co-sponsor, so I always thank him. And then I ask him something about tax reform. And he encourages everybody in the audience, if you're not familiar with the fair tax, you need to learn about it. There's a good book. And then out of his shirt pocket, he pulled the little business cards, the prebate cards, which are one of the most popular items in the fair tax store. And we were so pleased. I mean, this guy really does. So if he beats somebody in Congress that is not familiar with the fair tax, this little business card has some basic information about the fair tax on one side, and it's got the prebate schedule on the flip side. And he carries those around in his pocket. So that's what we mean, that's how a congressman or senator can further enhance our efforts with the fair tax by encouraging other people to learn about it.
And when he realizes that particular action is going to get him votes, or her votes, it's going to get better.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to go.
He knows the fair tax is pretty popular in his district, so...
Indeed. Let's remind you of our email address real quick. TheFairtaxGuys@gmail.com is how you get a hold of us, or you can leave us a comment or a question on Facebook. You can tune into our next Facebook Live event, which we have not scheduled yet, but we're working on it, and we will get that out as quick as we can. But I say, we mentioned last episode, we filled up the whole thing. That thing flew like by, because we had some other stuff here that we were going to talk about that we just didn't get time to.
Yeah.
You found a very neat little list that was actually published like 5 years ago. But it's still pretty relevant. So some of the facts in there may be a bit outdated. It's probably a little bit worse now than some of the things that's brought up on this list.
But the concepts are
We want to go through the 24 outrageous things about the tax code that will make you go, why are we still having this thing? We need to rip it out by the roots and replace it with a fair tax.
And this is on a website called theeconomiccollapseblog.com. I'm not sure I agree that we're going to have an economic collapse.
Well, I hope the income tax collapses. I'm pretty sure that'll happen.
Oh, yeah. The income tax is going to collapse, no doubt about it. It's a matter of whether Congress does something about it beforehand or waits until there's a dire emergency.
The name like that, you'd kind of think that's an alarmist and you're not really sure. But these look like to be pretty well researched out points.
Yeah.
And let's go by the merit of the point, not so much as where it's coming from. And the first one says the U.S. tax code is now 3.8 million words long. That's 5 years ago. It's more than that now.
Yeah.
And this note makes note of the entire works of William Shakespeare, which I thought were endless in high school English class. That's another old thing there. But if you take the entire collected works of William Shakespeare, you've got less than 1 million words, about 900,000 words.
Yeah.
So you got probably closer to 5 times. The tax code is 5 times the length of every word that William Shakespeare ever wrote.
And that
will boggle your mind.
That's just the tax code. Then the bureaucrats write regulations based on the tax code, what you have to comply with. Then there are instructions on how to comply with those regulations. And in addition to all that, if that isn't enough, you've got court cases. You've got the tax law that's decided in court when somebody challenges the IRS. Sometimes the court decides for the IRS. Sometimes they decide for the plaintiff. But you add all that together, and I remember Steve Hayes talking about 10 to 11 million words total.
Yeah, when we're talking about the tax code being 75,000 pages, we are including all that in that count.
Yeah, that's right.
Just
because
to be sure,
you're responsible for all of it. I mean, if the court makes a decision on a particular aspect of the law, then that's the law, and we're all subject to it. So yes, we are responsible for every word of it.
So it is outrageous that the tax code is as long and as complicated as it is. That's why the politicians are now saying we need to simplify it, and which is why you need to ask them, well, why don't you replace it entirely with a fair tax?
Yeah, fair tax.
It gets no simpler than paying for something that's included in the price when you buy something at the cash register.
The whole entire fair tax bill is 133 pages, and a lot of that is just itemizing all the current tax codes that are going to be replaced, or rescinded, I should say, that are going to be nuked. So it's very, very simple in comparison.
All right, moving along down the list. Number 2, according to the National Taxpayers Union, U.S. taxpayers spend more than 7.6 billion, with a B, billion hours complying with federal tax requirements. Imagine what our society would look like if all that time was spent on more economically profitable activities.
Yeah, and it's bad enough as an individual you have to spend a certain number of hours or maybe a whole day. I mean, I'm retired, and my wife and I don't have a business. We don't have any. We're just retired. We get retirement income, and that's it. And it still takes. I go through the itemized deductions just in case I might actually break the threshold. But I spend all that time just to have the software say, "Oh, congratulations, you're taking the standard deduction."
Yeah, somebody was saying you got to calculate your taxes, twice.
Yeah,
you really have to do it 3 times if you consider the alternative minimum tax as well.
Yeah.
So you got to calculate your regular taxes with a standard deduction versus itemized deductions, and you spend an hour answering TurboTaxes or whatever your software is, answering all their questions, and then they come back and say, you need to take the standard deduction. Well, I've wasted the last hour. And then once you've got your taxes figured that way, then the alternative minimum tax comes into play for a lot of folks. So you've got to figure your taxes 2, maybe 3 different ways, and then pay the highest amount.
and so, like I'm saying, that's bad enough for an individual. But what if you're a business? I mean, there's another whole world of hurt out there when it comes to the tax code. And you might have to hire a tax specialist, a CPA or whatever, that specializes in taxes to make sure that you're obeying the tax code to the letter of the law, so you don't get one of those nice little letters from the IRS. So you've got to pay somebody to figure out your taxes and make sure you're paying them right. Then, if you have some extra money to throw around, you can scour the tax code and make sure you're taking advantage of all the legal loopholes, because there are lots of loopholes in there if you can find them. And if you can reduce your tax burden by using a legal loophole, then you should do that. But it costs money to find those legal loopholes, because you just don't tell the computer, computer, find me a legal loophole in the tax code,
Maybe on Star Trek, but that's it.
Yeah.
Number 3, 75 years ago, the instructions for Form 1040, 2 pages long. Today, they're 189. That was as of 5 years ago. It's probably worse than that now.
Yeah. So the 1040, which is the individual, all right, no big deal. 189
that's not
pages.
all the schedules and stuff that you have to attach to it.
Yeah,
but,
like if you have employee business expenses and whatever else.
So again, if the politicians say they want to simplify the tax code, tell them to get rid of that.
Yep.
The instruction manual for the fair tax is not printed at all. It does not exist. You don't need it.
That's right.
You do not need instructions on how to go up and pay the price on at the cash register of things you buy. That's how you pay your federal taxes under the fair tax. No instructions necessary.
And something like 98% of the people in this country are already paying a sales tax.
Yeah, and you don't have to print it in Spanish and English and Chinese and French and all the other languages. Oh, mercy. That's it.
So, all right, what else? We got...
go ahead. Advance to number 4. Do not collect $200.
Yeah, right. There have been, and again, this was 5 years ago, 2012, there have been 4,428 changes to the tax code over the last decade. it is incredibly costly to change the tax software, tax manuals, tax instruction booklets for all those changes. Think of all the trees.
Yeah, and it is incredibly impossible to understand them all.
Now, on the last episode, we looked at the Congress.gov and found that at that point, there were 999 proposals to change the tax code. So it's got to be over 1,000 now. And again, as a reminder, that's just since January. So we're not even halfway through the 115th Congress, and we got over 1,000 proposals to change the tax code.
Let me read them H.R. 3892 again.
Oh, go ahead.
If you want to talk about simplicity, you got to be able to understand it. H.R. 3892 is a proposal to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide an exception for certain spun-off voluntary employees' beneficiary associations to the limitation on the exemption from tax on unrelated business taxable income of amount set aside for qualified benefits.
There.
You still not figured that one out, have you?
Yeah, I hope you haven't turned off the podcast by reading that, because it's just an example of the absurdity of this tax code. All right, I suppose somebody understands that, and also it points out that a lot of people in Congress are attorneys. You can tell by the legislation they write. That's just the title. That's just the title. Can you imagine what the substance of that bill is?
Oh. All right, we got to move along here. Number 5. According to the National Taxpayers Union, the IRS currently has 1,999 different publications, forms, and instruction sheets that you can download from the IRS website. I guarantee that's 5 years old. There's well over 2,000 now.
Oh, yeah. That's so that's your tax code for it, folks. 2,000 different publications. All right, and again, even if your taxes are fairly simple, like the retired person that I am, all right, businesses have to grapple with this. And when they pay more to comply with the tax code, they roll it into the cost of their product or service. And you and I end up paying for it every time.
All right. Again, this is coming from a list on the economiccollapseblog.com. If you want to follow this out and check it out, it's in the archives section. And number 6, I love this one, it's talking about simplicity versus complexity. Yeah. Our tax system has become so complicated that it's almost impossible to file your taxes correctly. For example, back in 1998, we've referenced this before, although I think this is a slightly different example. They said in 1998, Money Magazine had 46 different tax professionals complete a tax return for a hypothetical household. All 46 of them came up with a different result. We've gotten 49 out of 50 in the study that we were looking at that Money Magazine did.
And I think the study we were talking about was 10 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And so nothing has gotten any better, has it?
No, but this next point is, we were talking about, getting professional help. A lot of people don't get professional help. They buy TurboTax or they buy some other software, tax preparation software. And it seems that really doesn't guarantee you success either. Read point 7.
It's bizarre, and it's not getting any better. Again, this report that we're bouncing off of today is 5 years old, so it has gotten worse.
But look at number 7 for software.
Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, in 2009, PC World had 5 of the most popular tax preparation software websites. Prepare a tax return for a hypothetical household. Now, what do you think happened? It came up with 5
let me guess you got 5
answers.
different answers. And if you had tried 17 different tax preparing software places, you would have gotten 17 different answers. But what's funny, if you go into H&R Block, or if you go into, they have the tax preparation at Walmart, various other places, they will use this kind of software. I don't know if they use the same software that's commercially available for you and me to use, but they will use software of some kind. H&R Block, they'll ask you the questions and they'll just put it into the computer and figure that out for you. But the software doesn't know the tax code any better than the rest of us do, as far as different versions of it coming up with the same answer. Then that is the complexity of the tax code at work for you.
Yeah. When you have a tax code that is this massive, how can one piece of software keep up with the whole thing? I mean, think about it. It's really not possible. So they do the best they can, and you keep your fingers crossed that the IRS doesn't come back on you.
All right, we're going to have to scoot here through time. We're going to have to skip a couple of these things, but I like number 9 here. According to the Tax Foundation, the average American has to work until April 17th just to pay federal, state, and local taxes. Back in 1900, Tax Freedom Day was January 22nd. You worked less than a month. Your earnings of less than a month paid your taxes for the year. Now you've got to work close to 5.
Yeah, now, and I believe that's up into May. Now, again, this report was 5 years old. So from April 17th, I think we're into May is your tax holiday. In other words, you work from January 1st till May something just to pay the taxes that you owe to the various governments, all right? And the rest of the year, you work for you and your family. Why is it that way? At the same time, we have some people who don't pay any income taxes. And then we have extremely wealthy people that get legal loopholes and tremendously reduce their tax burden by using these legal loopholes. So
that perfectly sets up point 13 on this list. It says, according to Forbes, the 400 highest earning Americans pay an average federal income tax rate of just 18%.
Yeah.
I guarantee they'll pay more than that under the fair tax.
Oh, absolutely. Depending, unless they live like hermits and they live in a cave or something.
Well, if you've got all this money, prances are really good. You're going to spend some of it, a good bit of it. And again, the fair tax taxes spending, which means it also taxes, existing wealth, not just income that you're making during this year.
Right.
If you earned money, 5 or 6 years ago, you've had it in the savings account, and now you're going to buy a Learjet with it. It's going to be taxed when you buy that Learjet, if it's a new one.
And I've had some people say,
used ones don't count.
What if somebody earns $10 million and they only spend $1 million? First off, it's none of your darn business, okay? Secondly, who cares? There's a very good friend of mine who's a business PhD, and he said, listen, savings is defined as deferred spending. You put something in savings, it's not going to stay there forever. It's going to get spent sometime.
Eventually, your washing machine is going to break down, as I have found out here the past couple of weeks.
So let's not worry about what people earn and what they spend, all right? First off, it's none of our business. Secondly, it will get spent and it will get taxed under the fair tax. Don't worry about it. And savings is good. Savings is good. If people put money in savings, that means the bank have money to lend to organizations to start new businesses and create new jobs. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Saving and investment helps the economy.
Yeah.
And the current income tax taxes savings and investment. And when you tax something, you get less of it. The fair tax does not. Again, the fair tax taxes only spending. So it doesn't matter how much you make or where you make it or anything like that. If you save it, you're not taxed on it. At least not when you make it. If you invest it, you're not taxed on it. You're not taxed until it is spent.
Yeah. So that's the way. All right. Let's go down here. The top 20% of all income earners in the United States pay approximately 86% of all federal taxes. So, for those people that are worried about that the rich are not paying their fair share, not according to that one.
Well, I guarantee that the rich will pay their fair share under the fair tax as well, because everybody's taxes up to the poverty level. And the taxes on your spending up to the poverty level are you don't owe that. You get that back in the prebate, which is a monthly rebate that you get on taxes that are collected from you that you don't owe. But beyond that, the more you spend, the more you take out of your own pocket to pay the fair tax with. So it is just a mathematical impossibility to spend more and pay a lower rate. It just doesn't happen.
And keep in mind that the payroll tax is the most regressive tax we have right now. It truly hurts the working poor. And yet the fair tax will be a progressive tax. All right, those people that are just getting by because of the prebate, they will be protected from excessive taxation. And yet those people that earn and spend a lot of money, they will pay their fair share because it's impossible to escape it. There's no loopholes for them. Right?
Oh, mercy. Point 16 on this list from the Economic Collapse blog. Sadly, as Bill Whittle has showed, I'm not sure who Bill Whittle is. We have to check that out. It says that you could take every single penny that every American earns above the $250,000 level. So if you're earning $1 million, you could take $750,000 of that guy's income in taxes. If you take every penny above the $250,000, it would only fund about 38% of the federal budget.
Yeah,
which kind of tells me you've got a spending problem as well, but that's not our issue here. But the FAIRtax doesn't worry about how it's spent. It just worries about raising the revenue. But when you've got that much, we got to fix this system because it is not supporting what it needs to support.
Yeah. By the way, I was at a conference in which Bill Whittle gave a speech. Very
you know
good.
him? Okay.
The guy makes a lot of sense. Yep. Okay. I like this one because this actually comes home with my youngest son. The United States has the highest corporate tax rate in the world, 35%. Ireland, the corporate tax is only 12.5%. This is causing thousands of corporations to move their operations out of the United States into other countries. That includes the company that my son works for. He works for an engineering firm that is now based in Ireland because they have a 12.5% tax rate, and instead of the 35% tax rate that's here in this country. Yeah. It's only common sense.
And if the FAIRtax reduces their corporate rate down to 0, what do you think happens to that company from Ireland? He comes home.
Yeah, let's see. Now, 0 is less than 12.5, right, Bob?
Yes, last time I looked. Yeah. You were a science teacher, right? You should know that.
Yep.
All right. But I love this one. Number 18 says, some tax havens are doing a booming business in setting up sham headquarters for U.S. corporations. For example, the city of ZUG, I guess that's Zug or Zug or whatever, Switzerland. They say that has a population of 26,000, but is headquarters for 30,000 companies.
That's a good one.
Everybody that lives there owns a company and part of another one.
Well, that's a lot of corporate offices that have a mailbox. Let's say they have a mailbox in Zug or Zug or however you pronounce that in Switzerland. Yeah, because they're taking advantage of the tax laws over there and escaping the onerous tax laws here in this country. Our tax code is chasing companies away. That means it's chasing jobs away. All right? Let's stop the madness. This is crazy. And reducing the corporate tax rate, yes, will help. But reducing it to 0 is going to help a whole lot more.
Absolutely. Number 19, this is kind of a head scratcher. It said in 1950, corporate taxes accounted for about 30% of all federal revenue. In 2012, accounted for only less than 7%. Yeah. But I guarantee that every dollar that was taxed on a business gets passed on to the consumer who eventually buys the end product.
That's right. And it also shows a couple of things. First off, some corporations have left the United States, as we just talked about. So there's fewer corporations here to tax. And secondly, they have successfully manipulated the tax code with their lobbyists to reduce their tax rate. And that means that the individuals have to make up the difference. Mm. So, the corporate tax burden might be down a bit by manipulating the tax code, but the individuals here in this country are going to make up for it.
But it doesn't change the economic law that says taxes roll downhill.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much the corporations have to write to Uncle Sam. They get that back from their customers, and they get it back from their shareholders in the form of lower dividends. They get it back from their employees, less benefits. Individuals pay the taxes, the corporations don't. We got to move on because we're running out of time again.
Okay.
I'm not sure where this is sourced from, but the Economic Collapse blog post here that we're reading says the ExxonMobil Corporation paid $15 billion in taxes in 2009. Not a single penny to the U.S. government.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting. If that's true, and I would assume it is, but.
They manipulated their corporate structure so that they legally avoided paying taxes in this country. Where does that help us? Why are all those loopholes in there? So it boggles the mind that you've got a tax code that complicated that it legally lets some entities get away with paying no tax.
Oh, well, but they paid a heck of a lot of compliance costs to get to that
Oh,
zero
sure.
figure. We've mentioned that before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And moving right along, again, in the same vein, many wealthy Americans hide enormous amounts of money outside the country in order to avoid paying their taxes. According to the IMF, I guess that's the International Monetary Fund, a total of $18 trillion currently being hidden in offshore banks. Again, that was 5 years ago. It's probably well over 20 now.
Yep. And we've heard the president talk about reducing the repatriation tax to allow some of this money to come back in. They had a few years ago, you heard about a stimulus, which never made any sense to me. You're going to take tax money from the taxpayers and give it back to them and call it a stimulus. Well, if we reduce the repatriation tax, that money will be flowing back into this country, and it's not borrowed from anybody. It's money that's outside of the country that's coming back into the country, and it's going to allow for the economy to grow. So,
let's reduce that repatriation tax to zero.
Yeah, zero would be even better than whatever the president is proposing.
Because no matter what the tax rate is, again, the corporate taxes and the compliance costs that are involved get passed on to individuals. We got just a couple of minutes left here in this episode. This is something I didn't know before.
Yeah.
Listen to this. It says the number of traffic accidents spikes each year right around April 15th.
Yeah, well,
so if we make April 15th just another lovely spring day like the FAIRtax will, we can save lives on the highway. Go for it.
That's right. Yeah, people are so in such a frenzy to get their tax return done. And I've heard people talk about this, getting to the post office by midnight to get that tax return postmarked by midnight. And so, and yeah, I can see this happening.
Yeah, this thing says over the last 30 years of data, that the accident rate around April 15th is like 6% higher than the week before and the week after.
Oh, my.
So it's a little spike everybody's doing.
Yeah.
So get rid of the income tax and in the name of highway safety.
That's a new lives.
That's a new one. We hadn't tried that before. Again, let's remind everybody of our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Write us a note, even if it's 2 pages long, single spaced. We'd love to hear from you, and interact with us on our Facebook page as well.
Yep. Yeah, and don't forget Pop Fox. Keep in mind from our last episode about contacting your congressman, keep it up. Don't let the pressure off. Keep the pressure on your congressmen and senators to co-sponsor the FAIRtax. Just keep it going all the time. And you can do one way of doing that is with Pop Fox.
Okay, and again, the points that we've been referring to over this past half hour have come from the economiccollapseblog.com. Want to give credit where it's due, so we're not accused of stealing somebody else's research. That's where this is coming from. You can go check that out if you'd like to. It does make some interesting. I didn't know about the traffic accident stuff. That's going to stick.
That was a new one.
That's going to stick in my head for the rest of the day. I wonder if Steve Hayes knows about that. Well, you'll have to ask him next time we see him.
Yeah, that's a good one. Also, Christmas shopping. Christmas is coming here, and you can do some of your shopping. If you do anything online, first go to FairtaxRewards.com. Start an account with them, which is free, and do your shopping through that website. And if you're going to buy something from Walmart, Target, wherever, they got thousands of stores in there. All right, you do it through that. And when you do that, you'll get a stipend, and Americans for Fair Taxation gets a stipend. Helps them pay the bills. So,
all right. And again, we would encourage you to join the 1040 Club.
Yeah.
Go to bigsolution.org if you'd like to get involved with helping the fair tax become a reality. Go to fairtax.org first if you need a little educational experience. Read through the FAQs and really understand what the fair tax is all about. I guarantee you once you understand it, you'll demand it. And then you get on to bigsolution.org and make it all happen.
Yep, and follow those links there. But we definitely need your financial support. If we're going to get this done, Americans for Fair Taxation and your state organizations, whatever state you're in, support these folks so we can get this crazy tax code out of the way and get the fair tax installed.
The 1040 Club is when you commit to $10.40 a month.
Every month.
To help get the fair tax passed. And that's going to wrap up this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. Thank you so much for listening again. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
The FAIRtax Guys reminding you, as we always do, that the fair tax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming.